Before the Moors arrived, there was scarce influence in the region, mostly from Visigothic and Roman sources. After the Umayyad conquest, the Moors came to control large areas of the Iberian Peninsula. The Emirate of Cordoba was formed. This political domain became known as Al-Andalus. Granada was an Islamic society which is reflected in their architecture. An iconic Moorish structure within Andalusia is the Alhambra. Though the Caliphate of Cordoba was never able to fully dominate the region, there being places such as Leon Glacier, Navarre and Barcelona, which would stand as Christian opposition in the region. Following the fragmentation of the Caliphate of Cordoba, their power began to dwindle to the Christian forces and slowly began to reclaim the land that the Moors had claimed centuries ago. With the Spanish Reconquista in full swing, it wouldn't be long before the Spanish would reclaim their lost territory. On January the 2nd of 1492, the last Muslim ruler in Iberia surrendered, and Fernando V and Isabella I ended the Granada War.
Granada is a place of tremendous amounts of history and architecture. The city displays its time and era through the architecture that is still evidently visible to this day. Creating an identity for itself through its strong architecture, it has created a strong tourist attraction that drives a wide amount of people from all around the world to come and visit these spaces, as it not only holds one type of style but also holds some of the best intricate work that has been created through the Gothic classical architecture. The different suburbs display the different architecture, such as Albuquerque, that shows the Moorish side of Granada, although what the city seems to lack is a sense of social aspects that are incorporated into the city. Simple things such as parks, leisure centres are missing and are hard to find. This is due to the nature of its original construction in early stages. These certain things may not have deemed to be such certain aspects at the time. The city seems to be covered with residential spaces, cathedrals and churches on every corner. Due to Moorish planning and construction, it makes it difficult for transportation living in today's age. Although this seemed like an acceptable route to take during its time, it has left an imprint on the city that will strongly remain the same unless changes made to the urban environment. Because of its strongly heritage-listed sites and holy places, these places of worship will remain the same for a long time. This leads to no real development and progression of the city's landscape. The city has remained in almost the same state that dated back to the 15th century. Granada is showing no signs of big improvement to grow into a modernised city that can cater for future generations to come. In order to drive the population out, it must create new jobs and heavily reconstruct its urban landscape to a new outlook, without damaging the heritage buildings. These architectural impacts have been both good and bad for its economy, in a sense that it has driven a lot of tourism to the city, but also drawn population out. These are architectural spaces we should deeply value that hold strong history of Granada, although it has to take a smarter approach on how to attack these problems that crumpled the city's population.
While looking at critique, certain theories automatically come up when thinking of Granada and its environs. Theories such as the colonial, post-colonial, modernist and postmodernist theories, whilst not forgetting about the symbolic architecture as a theory, are just some of the examples that can be used while studying the Granadan culture and its people. These are theories that all have great attributes to them that link them back to the architecture and the people of the place. And Granada, having been under the Moorish rule for so long throughout the 13th and 14th century, has until today a great footprint that symbolizes that the Moors were indeed in Granadan soils. One can actually form the argument that the Moorish culture had a great impact over the Spanish culture. But if you're to critique this statement, I would actually say this is false, and this is why. If you were to look at this entire scenario through the post-colonial theory, you would see that this is false, and this is because through the post-colonial theory, the colonizer would have to teach the colonized their culture, their practices, their way of doing life, and while doing this, implant the idea that their culture and their way of doing things are way more superior to the colonized ways of doing things. And you have great theories such as Edward Said and Gayatri Spivak and Homi Bhabha, who all have greatly studied this field and all have all these different approaches to it. And Homi's approach is that the colonizer would teach their culture and their way of life, and once gain freedom, the colonizer would try and emulate their culture. So the big question is, can this theory actually be applied to Granada? And if you were to critique the theoretical statement, I think my answer would be it cannot, because although Granada had actually gone through the colonization under the Moors and gained their territory back, gained their freedom back through the conquest by the Catholics, you don't see the Spanish actually making an effort at all to be like the colonizer. In fact, they completely reject the colonizer's culture and practices of Islam and opt for a more westernized culture. I actually think that they do this to spite their colonizer, like a slap in the face. And every year Granada actually has a festival mocking the Moorish culture and the Islamic ties by having a reenactment of the reconquest by the Catholics from the Moors. And when you actually take all these factors into consideration, you actually see there's a complete rejection of Moorish culture by the Spanish people.
Now we will present a critique that discourses whether Granada was considered positive architecturally in regards to theory and evolution in comparison to neighbouring principalities. In order to make a direct comparison and critique the theory behind the structures, we must identify the sample precedents. In case of Granada, we examined Alhambra, and for comparison and critique we will also look at the Kingdom of Leon and Leon Cathedral. The research is important as it highlights the evolution of the architectural theory in each region. The procedure used to evaluate was to observe the architectural theories and methods employed in their construction. This type of research hopes to identify the difference in their architectural evolution. First we look at Alhambra, which is the pinnacle of the Moorish style, which specializes in the ornate and spiritual. When compared to its contemporaries, we witness a deep spiritual connection to the architecture. The Leon Cathedral boasts the same accolades instead for Christianity. Where these structures differ are their construction methods. Alhambra employs a lightweight feel with its floating stalactites and awareness of environmental context. Leon Cathedral has a heavy classical atmosphere less open to progressive techniques. This observation leads to believe architecture in Granada was more progressive in advancing architectural theory and methods by utilizing less conventional approaches to construction when compared to other principalities. The major finding would be that the Moors did have a positive impact on the advancement of architectural theory in the Granada region.